Welcome, everyone, to Let's Raid, a Vegas Raiders podcast here on the Couch Potato Diary Sports Network. My name is Peter Klein. Thank you all very much for tuning in today. This is a bit of a new project that I'm starting. For those who are familiar with the Couch Potato Diary Sports Network, basically it's a general sports podcast, but I now am kind of putting a little bit more of a specific focus on some of the teams that I follow, and my favorite NFL team happens to be the Vegas Raiders. And so that is going to be the team that we're paying attention to on this particular podcast. So the format, we're going to be looking at a few different things to get ready for the start of the season. And then each week, probably on Fridays, definitely on Fridays, we are going to be going over what happened the previous week, and we are going to be looking at the game upcoming for that week. So pretty simple, but hopefully you enjoy it. If you have any thoughts, if you're watching on YouTube, leave it in the comments. And if you are listening, leave a review, or you can follow me on social media at Primetime Klein, wherever you socially media, I guess. Anyway, today we're going to be looking at the key new additions for the Vegas Raiders, going to be previewing the offense, and then looking at breakout players at the end. So let's get into it, shall we? We begin with new additions, and I think the biggest key addition for the Raiders this year is on the defensive line, and that is with Christian Wilkins. Did they overpay for him? Maybe. A very distinct possibility that they did. But I think this gives you a real good dynamic on the defensive line. I think when you look at what they're hoping to do, you have him getting pressure up the middle. You have Crosby causing problems on the outside. So either Crosby does a speed rush, forces the quarterback to step up in the pocket, and Wilkins swallows them whole, or Wilkins gets a good push up the middle, forces a QB back, gets a better angle for Crosby to be able to go around and get the sack. You have Wilkins, who is coming off of a 9-sack season, 11% pressure rate. And again, a lot of teams, this isn't a premium position, but I think for the Raiders, it is a smart move, as this is a team that just needs talent on the defensive side of the football. And I think Antonio Pierce kind of recognized this and goes out and gets the player that he wanted, and gets the player that maybe they needed on the defensive side of the football. And so I think when you're just looking at how to allocate your dollars, would you just in a vacuum want to be spending that amount of money on the defensive tackle? Probably not. But I do think, you go out and get one of the best. And I think you can make a very compelling case that he is one of the ones that is worth spending that money on. So I think that you do that, and then you look at kind of raising the talent level on this defense. I think it will help for this Vegas Raiders team this season. The other one, when you make a change at quarterback, that's going to be a pretty big new addition. And Gardner Minshew, we found out this week, will take over as the starting quarterback for the Raiders. He's not spectacular. He is not the quarterback of the future. He is maybe not even the quarterback of next season, or even week 10. But this is a guy who has the starter's role now. And he came in case Aiden O'Connell couldn't get the job done as the starter. And different people will make different arguments about who did what in the preseason, but the fact remains they were more comfortable with Gardner Minshew as the starting quarterback than they were Aiden O'Connell, and that just is what it is at this point. Admittedly, I'm not the biggest Aiden O'Connell fan, so I don't particularly mind this. If the Raiders' season doesn't go particularly well, then you are fine with Minshew not coming back and drafting a quarterback, or if you want to draft a quarterback and let them kind of redshirt for a year, which I don't think teams are as good at as they like to think they are. But I think Gardner Minshew is fine. He is a decent placeholder. So you just have a professional quarterback. And if nothing else, I don't think this is a team that has much of a chance of making the postseason this year. But I think from a evaluation standpoint, you at least now know that this is a player, or that this is a quarterback that just lets you see what else you have. You Whether it's the offensive line, well, it's a young quarterback. He's not making the right decisions. He's holding on to the ball too long, and it's making the offensive line look bad. Or a young running back in Zamir White. Well, no one trusted that we were going to throw the ball because we had a young quarterback, so they stacked the box, and he couldn't do a fucking thing. You don't necessarily have that now. Not that everyone's going to be like, Jesus fucking Christ, it's Gardner Minshew. But teams are going to have to at least respect what you are going to do in the passing game. And I think that will help the Raiders kind of evaluate things. And then the last one is Brock Bowers. Again, we are talking about a Raiders team that spent big money on the defensive tackle and drafted a tight end for the second year in a row. So, bigger picture, not moves that I would like. And again, just like in a vacuum, if you told me that, I would lose my mind. But Brock Bowers is such an interesting player. He was the leading receiver for Georgia's dominant teams. Now, they weren't dominant because of their offense. We know this. But Brock Bowers, I think, is a really, really fascinating player. And just like listening to Mel Kiper Jr. go on and on and on about how dynamic of a player this guy is, and how he is going to be able to affect this offense or affect offenses in the National Football League. I think you have to at least kind of give him a shot and see what you have in this kid. I think you can see a lot of variety in the ways that he can be used. Mel Kiper was talking about having him line up in the backfield as a running back sometimes. He is not going to be just like, oh, well, he's going to help block on the side. I mean, he might. He probably will at some points. That's a tight end's job. But he is going to be more out there as a receiver and probably more as a slot receiver than anything. And I'm so excited to see how the Raiders are able to use him. We'll get into the offensive preview here in a second. Creativity was not a strong point with this Raiders team, but I do think that he is going to be an interesting factor. And so again, when you are looking at, okay, well, they used a high draft pick on a tight end for the second year in a row, that's less than ideal asset allocation. For sure it is. But again, this is a guy who has the potential to be a game-breaking player. And with all the Devontae Adams rumors going around, this team might need one of those at some point. And so, like, his high end is elite-level tight end. His low end is unusable. But his high end is one of the best tight ends in the sport in a couple of years. And so that's going to be interesting to see how the Raiders get the most out of that particular player. Next week, we're going to be focusing on the defensive side of the football. This week, the focus is on the offense. And last year, to call the Raiders conservative on offense would be a bit of an understatement. The Raiders did not really do a whole lot in terms of moving the football. But you have an offense that they were 27th in offensive points scored. They were 27th in yards gained, 27th in yards per play, 24th in total offensive EPA gained and EPA per play. Only 4%, the reason they were able to do this and be successful is only 4% of their drives ended in turnovers. That is first in the National Football League. The Raiders were 7-3 if they got a takeaway, but they were 1-6 if they didn't. That was the biggest win-loss swings in the NFL. The Raiders went 5-1 if they won the turnover battle, but were 3-8 if they did not. That's how they won their games. They weren't dominant offensively or anything. They just didn't screw up. Basically what was the way that they went out and they won their games. And that is a tricky thing to duplicate going into an 17 game season. It'll be 18 soon. But going into a 17 game season, that's a different, it's difficult to be perfect 18 games in a row. And so sometimes you are going to have to outperform your mistakes. But another thing, you are going to have to put yourself in better situations. And the Raiders just didn't offensively last year. Most of these stats, I think all of them, are from Warren Sharp's guide. On early downs in the first three quarters, the Raiders ran the ball at a top 10 rate. Nearly 50% of their early downs were runs that is the ninth highest rate. So basically how they tried to go about things, the Raiders tried to avoid a negative play on first down. On second down, the Raiders averaged the number 5 longest distance to go to first down with an average distance of 8.1, and they still ran the ball at the number 8 highest rate on second down. when they did pass it, they threw only 11% of their passes beyond the sticks, which is 29th in the NFL, and averaged just 5.8 air yards per attempt, which was 24th in the NFL. And so that, like, again, I'm not the biggest Aiden O'Connell guy, but that puts your quarterback in difficult spots. When A, you are that predictable, and B, the reason why people like Warren Sharp and the numbers people and all of that look at how much you throw on first down, it's because those are considered to be neutral downs. And so if you have 3rd and 8, you're probably throwing, right? Like most teams, you can catch them off guard with a draw, but that's because they are assuming you are throwing the pass. And eventually that's not going to work. Teams can gear up for you defensively. And in the National Football League, the best football league in the world, when teams know what you're going to do, it becomes very difficult to do that. And so to put, whether it was a young quarterback or Jimmy Garoppolo, constantly in 2nd and 8, 3rd and 7, 2nd and 8, 3rd and 7, 2nd and 8, 3rd and 6, it just becomes a little bit more difficult. So when you pass on first down, the defense is a little bit more neutral in theory. And so that allows you to maybe make life a little bit easier on your quarterback. And so I think a lot of this was just a lack of trust in Aiden O'Connell. I think part of it was just how the team was schemed. And you have a defensive-minded coach, that's what they're going to do. Hopefully, I think this is something that they adjust going forward. And I think a lot of teams try to avoid 3rd down. You know, like you don't want to put yourself in that spot. And the teams that had the fewest amount of 3rd downs also happened to be some of the best teams in the NFL. So that there is, I guess, a confirmation bias there. And instead of prioritizing bypassing 3rd downs, the Raiders' entire game plan seemed to set up 3rd and short. 50% of their series led to 3rd downs, the 2nd highest rate in the NFL. 24% of their overall plays were 3rd downs. That is the 3rd highest in the league. I think that this is going to be a team that pushes it a little bit more with Gardner Minshew. I think with a veteran quarterback, there's going to be a little bit more of an understanding that I can just throw the ball up to Davante Adams and he is going to catch it. And that is something, like, when you are in 2nd and 8, Adams knows to just run to the markers and turn, and you can find him. And like, hopefully there is a bit of that chemistry that is built up. But I feel like this is still a team that, while limited at times, does have more weapons offensively than they were kind of treating it as last year. Like Myers, Jacoby Myers and Davante Adams are a really good wide receiver duo. And you match that last year with Josh Jacobs, that's a pretty good kind of 3-headed monster that you can put out there as an offensive unit and feel relatively comfortable with that. The Raiders kind of treated it like they didn't have anybody, and they were just kind of hoping that they would stumble into something. And so I think Gardner this year, there is going to be a way to attack things a little bit more. And then you add Bowers to maybe either you want to stretch the field with Adams and Myers, who are very good at that, and then you have Bowers underneath. If you want to get creative with Bowers, whether it's out of the slot or again as a running back, you can do that. That there's ways that they can go about it to kind of open things up a little bit. But that's going to be something I want to see from the Raiders in the early part of the season, is what kind of offensive attack do they use, and are they looking to push the ball a little bit more on 1st and 2nd down. You also have Zamir White, who I don't think is as good as Josh Jacobs, and quite frankly, I kind of just view Zamir White as just a guy. But he did handle things decently well last year. He ranked 9th in yards per attempt when contacted at or behind the line of scrimmage last year. Jacobs was 48th out of 49th. So White was getting a couple of those extra yards. And again, when you're getting to 3rd down, when 24% of your plays are on 3rd down, if you can get a couple of those extra yards on a few plays, that just helps move the ball a little bit more. I think White is kind of going to be just a guy, but I think he's going to be... This is where I think some of the fantasy football stuff can kind of cloud your brain a little bit, because I think White is going to be a pretty effective NFL player. For fantasy, I wouldn't touch him. But I think for real life football, he's going to be, I think, really, really important and really impactful to this team. Overall, the offensive outlook for this team is really difficult to kind of wrap your head around because they were so conservative last season. And quite frankly, because the offense wasn't overly efficient with Derek Carr. Like, it's been a while since the Raiders have had a good offense, since the year that Carr got hurt, right? That's the last time it really felt like the Raiders were really rolling offensively. But I do think when you have Adams and you have Jacoby Myers and you have Brock Bowers, this is an offense that should be able to unlock a little bit more of that. And Minshew, we've kind of seen that as the season goes on, it starts to fade into the background and be not quite as good. And that can be a little bit troubling for sure. But I also think that this is a quarterback that is smart enough to at least get the ball to the playmakers and try to let them do their thing. So I'll be interested to see how the Raiders kind of attack things on the offensive side. The one thing that you worry about is the loss on the offensive line with Illuminor on his way out. He ranked 9th among right tackles in pressure rate allowed. We don't really know who's going to be replacing him, but one of the likely candidates is Thayer Munford, who ranked 41st out of 42nd at the position. If he's a weak link, this line does take a pretty substantial step backwards. Now, I will say he has had a lot of reps. With Colton Miller being out, that they've allowed the kids to kind of step in and kind of grow. And they drafted the right guard, Jackson, I think, on in the second round this year. And so I think there is maybe some hope that an advancement at that position maybe helps the right tackle situation out a little bit, but that is certainly less than ideal when you are dealing with a Bosa in your in your division. Khalil Mack as well. The Raiders were very familiar with what Khalil Mack did against them a season ago. You know that Kansas City is going to be bringing some pressure as well. So the offensive line not holding up would be a disaster for this team. They do kind of need everything to go perfectly to, I think, even have an average offensive season, but I still think the potential is there for this team to be able to move the football and actually be able to come up with some big plays. I think the main thing, O'Connell or Jimmy Garoppolo, both very risk averse. And I think Minshew kind of gets the reputation that he's just a gunslinger. He's not exactly, but he at least knows enough that it's kind of if Adams is even, he's got his guy beat, right? Like he is good enough that he can win a jump ball against most defensive backs in the NFL, and that's going to be able to give him an advantage. So I think Minshew is going to be able to step up and take advantage of that, and so I do think we will see some growth from the offensive side of the football for the Vegas Raiders. And for these team specific podcasts and the season previews, I like to look at who's going to be a bounce back player. And really, there's kind of only one, and that is Devontae Adams. And that is such an important piece for this Raiders team. If they're going to do anything this year, Adams has to be one of the top 5 receivers in the National Football League. Again, last year, he ran 127 go routes. 63% of the targets on go routes were charted as inaccurate. That was by far the most of any qualified wide receiver. And so that was kind of the issue, is that O'Connell or Garoppolo wouldn't throw it to him unless he was wide fucking open. And when he was, they were missing him because that is not the strength of either guy, is the deep ball. Jimmy Garoppolo, certainly. But that is not really their bag, right? Gardner Minshew, at least again, can be capable of doing such things. And so I do think that Adams has a chance to grow with the Raiders coming out of this one. Adams averaged just 0.24 yards per route on go routes. That was dead last, 43 of 43 among wide receivers with 100+ route runs. For comparison, Tyreek Hill finished first at 4.1 yards. Gardner Minshew is good at just getting the ball to his number one guy. Pittman feasted with him a season ago. Minshew knows where his bread is kind of buttered out on that field. So I do think that this is going to be a real bounce back year for him. They need someone on the offensive line to be a bit of like we talk about it, Munford or someone on that offensive line to have a bounce back year. Especially like Miller's been banged up for most of the training camp. That's obviously a concern. So they need someone to bounce back, but like defensively, they kind of got best case scenario from him, from a lot of guys. Sorry, on the defense. I know there were some people who just had a couple of other guys tabbed, but I think that like they kind of got what you would hope out of all of those guys. And so I think the main one is, can, like, instead of bouncing back, can those guys just stay consistent coming into this season? That would certainly help. All right, so that is the maiden voyage of Let's Raid, the Vegas Raiders podcast. For now, all the content is going to live on podcast. It's going to be in the Couch Potato Diary podcast feed with all the other stuff, but I will try to label each one. And so it'll be very obvious what is Let's Raid and what isn't, and all of that. And on YouTube, it's going to have its own playlist, so keep that in mind. And if you just want Raiders content on whether it is wherever you are, I guess, check it out on YouTube. It'll be available there. All right, that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Let me know what you like and don't like. I really am looking forward to this project here this season. And so looking forward to kind of getting this off the ground. Leave a comment if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a review. If you are listening, make sure you subscribe no matter where you are taking part in this podcast today. Follow me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein, wherever you'll be able to follow me. And I will talk to all of you later. Have a great day, everybody.
Want a website with unmatched power, speed, and control? Try Bluehost Cloud, the new web hosting plan from Bluehost, built for WordPress creators by WordPress experts. With 100% uptime, incredible load times, and 24/7 WordPress priority support, your sites will be lightning fast with global reach. And with Bluehost Cloud, your sites can handle surges in traffic no matter how big. Plus, you automatically get daily backups and world-class security. Get started now at Bluehost.com.